Hi everybody, I'm Cinnamon Cooney. Online I'm known as the Art Sherpa, and I'm really excited to be here today for the Ever After collab. I'm just happy to be working with other amazing artists and getting to share a bunch of new and different techniques that I personally enjoy in my own studio, in my own art style with you. So it's going to be some of the materials that you might be familiar with if you know me, and some new materials that you might not be familiar with if you know me. I'm really excited that I've got a PDF to go along with this to give you the information about the materials and the steps to kind of help you on that level. And then of course I'm going to teach it through this video right here. So on my table I have a 16 by 20 Arches cold press paper. This is 140 pound. And I'm going to be using watercolor and acrylic. I'm going to be using fluid and flow acrylics and just regular brushes. I may throw some walnut ink in there and everything by the time we're all said and done. I've invented and sketched a design here that I really felt worked with my Goldilocks theme. I was very excited about getting Goldilocks and the Three Bears. To me, there is a lot of levels to the story and speaks a lot to who we are as a species internally. And this particular piece, I really wanted to create a dream quality to. So I did a bunch of research and I found a bunch of inspiration, mostly that came out of ecology, about the way we relate to our natural world, and tried to put this in here. So this story hopefully will reveal that expression of the way we are part of and then sometimes outside of our own natural world. I am using Qor Watercolors today, and I vacillated between Qor and Daniel Smith, but I really love Qor because of their vibrant colors and I'm enjoying them. And so I'm going to get just a Simply Simmons wash. This is a 1/2 inch wash. I'll make sure it's washed out. And I'm going to kind of prep in my canyon here a little bit of water. You can either, look at the final piece and trace this design in if your drawing skills are very confident. But if your drawing skills are not confident, don't feel bad about using the traceable. Drawing is just one art skill. I use all kinds of rendering skills when I'm laying in a piece. And on this one, I implemented just regular rendering, even some tracing and some things, just to get the overall look and feel that I want. I'm pre-wetting the canyon a bit. And I'm going to come under her hair just a touch with this, because this part here I'm going to want to be watercolor. I think watercolor and acrylics work very, very nicely together. I'm kind of around this adorable little house here, which is a lot of fun. I don't think you have to be doing a 16 by 20. You can take that traceable and do it any size you want, or sketch any part of this in that you want. I've got a little canyon here. Because the canyon is going to be in silhouette, as you saw from the final picture, hey, it doesn't have to be that perfect. And right now, the way I'm applying this wetness to this paper right here gives you a reason why heavier weight of paper makes a big, big difference. When I'm working, try to go as heavy as I can in the weight of the paper, so that I'm going to start out with some Hansa Yellow here. And I've got kind of a crazy watercolor area going on, because I always do have kind of a crazy watercolor area going on. I'm just going to put a little of that out. A little Hansa. And I'm going to work right here, just letting the water wick out the pigment. I think that's my favorite thing about watercolors, is the way I can allow the paper and the water to work together as a team to just pull colors and events out. So I'm going to pull, it's a very interesting little color that we have here. This is the nickel. making sure. Yeah, this is the nickel right here, which I had put out earlier. I'm going to richen up this here. I want this to be very, very whimsical, especially around the house of the three bears, which is up here on this cliff. You know, and it'll be interesting, the bears having sort of a very wild naturalist quality to them, and yet me implying that this is their home on the cliff. I'm going to pull out some of my Peril Red, which I'm pretty fond of. A little bit out here. Got a little bit already. You don't need that much. And I'm going to mix a little of that into my yellow to start working a nice bright orange. Just creating this very dramatic space. And enjoying that dramatic space. Because I am going to be going over this with acrylics, I don't have to preserve the white of my paper like I normally would in watercolor to accomplish my goal here, because I can go back and absolutely get that. I'm really allowing the water and paper to wick out my pigment, and because I'm using these Qors, I'm getting really intense colors. Like, it takes very little load on my brush to pull anything out. I'm going to grab some of my quinacridone that I have just sitting here happily, and I'll let this continue to wick. I don't want to remove the veining that I'm getting completely. I want some of that to stay there, so I'm going to be a little careful around those spots, because I like my veining and I want to preserve it a little bit. I let some of this quinacridone come down here, working around the house, get over into my ultramarine spot. Quin and ultramarine make one of my very favorite purples. I'm going to start working that there. I can tape down my paper if I'm concerned about wrinkling, but actually there's not too many highly wet processes I plan to do, so I'm not that worried about it at this time. Just enjoying putting in of this little sky area here. Enjoying the color of the paint. Coming along, using my wash to define my lines. It's got a little dry over here, but that's okay. If I lose anything when I come back with the acrylics, it'll come back to me very easily. It's going to be a nice combination of these soft watercolor techniques and the crispness of acrylic techniques together. Get some of my little orange back in, the Peril Red. I'm going to lose a lot of the detail of what I have here when I put in the trees. And I'm going to let it do that. When I have too much pulling, just pull it in with my brush. Because I won't want that. I might take this opportunity while the paper is white before I put in a lot of colors to do a little soft splattering to imply distant stars. So I'm taking out a soft body white and putting on palette paper. And I'm going to just do the traditional whack technique, the splatter that we're all pretty familiar with. Where I'm not in love with it, I'll simply just pull it up. And let it blend out into the space. We're not even going to worry about that too much. Now I'm letting this resolve over here so it can get a nice crisp edge when I come back with the deep tones. I'm going to start working my girl's face. Now I think it's very important to use reference photos whenever you're doing any kind of fantasy design. I think it's great to paint from imagination, and if you're doing something that's incredibly stylized, absolutely go ahead and just like let those wings furl. But if you want any element of the real in your surreal, it's really wonderful to have great reference photos. As it said in the PDF, I got these from Paint My Photo. Really love them as a resource for artists. I think it's just a great place to go get inspiration, and I hope it's a place that you might find inspiration. So I picked this really beautiful picture. I picked the picture of this girl because she spoke to me, and I felt that the emotion in her face the photographer had captured really kind of captured the longing look that I wanted my Goldilocks to have, because I wanted to tell the story of being inside something but yet feeling outside of something. I'm very into, in my fine art, telling the story of the other, of being a little bit outside of whatever that inner circle is, and so definitely wanted to capture that with her. So pretty excited about that. I'm going to mix up some skin tones, but they're not going to be quite skin tones. So I might take a little of my Pearl Red over to my yellow ochre, and I might grab a little of my crimson here. Just going to mix not quite a skin tone. Now, I don't use any white in this mixture because the paper is my white. And again, if I get anything that's not pleasing me, I can always come back with the acrylic paint and change it. But on this, I want not quite skin tones. So I'm going to want this to be very, very light. Look at my reference photo. Make sure I have my reference photo here too. It's good to keep things round and handy as you need them. I'm going to pull some of my quinacridone maybe and a little of my alizarin out. I just want a little of this around the nose. I think around the eyes. a little of this slightly redder tone. Again, one thing that I have happening that I know is that I'll have my acrylic paint to come in and work some of this too. So this is just about getting that first kind of story on that I feel like I'm trying to tell. More the quinacridone and the yellow ochre. Okay, my first layer's on. Just letting those lay in. Even on watercolor, I tend to be a very relaxed painter about things. But I would probably be less relaxed about this if I didn't feel like I was going to come back with my acrylic and continue to refine the story here. And I could have used my acrylics in a lot of these techniques, but the thing about acrylic paints is where the watercolors here will lift and lift and lift, the acrylic paints will not. I'm just trying to pull some very strong pigment pink here. I want to just make sure I'm creating that space around the eye that's a little reddened. Maybe in the ear as well. Pull onto the alizarin. Just put that undertone into her skin. So this type of work is a little more intensive for me. You should expect it to be a little more intensive for you. You should find yourself thinking and pondering what you're doing a little bit more than maybe usual. And that is as it should be. Now you're going to see me tip my paper periodically to allow the work to run down. I will be playing with how this layers as we go. The back side of this piece will get quite messy. Pull some of this ultramarine out into this red oxide. I'm going to start putting in some shadow. That I want to talk about what's happening here. I like layering color in watercolor. I like the way it glazes and lays over itself. Ultramarine Blue with some red oxide here. Just keeping that, giving it a dark value. Just having fun. I think that's the most important thing, no matter where you are in your art, is that you've got to keep it fun. You need to keep it healing. You know, art should be restoring you and giving you back to yourself always. Coming up to the brow bone here and just adding the shadow. Come on the other side here. I just didn't really quite pull close enough to the lips. So I'm going to work this much closer to the lips. I might switch to a smaller, more controlled brush at this stage. I'm going to get a number 6 Royal and Langnickel mixed media brush. Just keep working my space. Just adding my shadow. Grab some blue. Get a little whimsical with the color here. Pull in some red. That's important. Just keep telling the story. This will be like everything else. There'll be layers and layers that have to happen. Got some phthalo blue here in my... This is permanent Alizarin Crimson. Just put this in here, start defining my lip space. You know, these will also have another definition when I come back with my acrylic. Another layer. Another element of the conversation. I'm going to pull in a darker set of that. Really I will definitely work some of this around the eyes. So just pulling this underneath here. And at the corner here. Let me pull this up the corner as well. Then I'm going to definitely go ahead and tip this and work this down the page. Grab some more pigment. Make sure it's fairly well loaded. So this nice blackberry. Does its work. Just pull this down a little bit. Just continuing to let that have its flow. I'm going to take a little of this burnt umber and this phthalo, make a gray. I really like those. Might even add a little Payne's gray to it. Just very lightly inside the eye. Pull in this gray color. Just some more thing inside the mouth here. Just under where I feel like the teeth will be, I'm going to just add a little bit of a shadow. Pull a little soft line up to where I think the teeth are going to be. Just barely defined. Just barely defined. Pull another little shadow up into the forehead. And I'm going to get a little of this nickel azo. With red oxide. I'm going to just very carefully start pulling this down. I'm going to flow my brush and imagine the wind, how it's catching the hair, using the edge of my brush. Just pull it this way. paint another little hair shadow here. I like to put my shadows on my hair in. Grab a little green that I've got going here. Little green. Get back into my nickel. Come up here. Just a little of the flow of this hair. Just the start of what this story is. In watercolor, you in general, have to hold your whites. You really, really need to preserve the space. So here's a weird thing. You need to preserve your space internally and externally. So when I'm working, and you'll notice I'm a little calmer than when I may be doing like another kind of boom, boom, boom class, was because like for me, this is very calming. This is very introspective. I'm pulling inside and really reflecting on everything I'm doing and then externally putting it on the paper. And so it's kind of a wonderful dialogue between the picture and myself, which I really, really enjoy. And that's something that, no matter what stage you're at in your painting, you can always start participating in that dialogue. And there's nothing as powerful as just grabbing a little bit of water and allowing the pigment that's already there to move, as you can see. Just letting that have that space is very powerful. Grabbing this nickel, which is such a intense color, especially in these pigments, in these paints. I'm enjoying that. So just pulling this up into this open space. I'm going to close the picture. I'm going to close the area where I'm telling the story by pulling a little bit of this hair this way. But not as a uniform lump. That's something I want you to think about, how you're closing your story space. So I'm going to probably retain some of this white. Up into the hair here. I feel like this is a great place to add maybe a little shadow, a little drama in the space. Just looking for the shadow in the hair. Just looking for my whimsy, which clearly there's a lot of whimsy in my regular life. So much whimsy in my regular life. You left it on my face the whole time? Oh, okay. Okay, let me get the hair in on watercolor and then we'll break. Okay. How is this looking? Great. Is she beautiful? Yeah. All right, so, if you need to, get a little of that phthalo into that red oxide, and you're going to get a very deep color. I'll come right here. And flow that out. It almost reminds me of a burnt umber. Back into the red oxide, so it doesn't feel like an alien in the space. Flowing this along the skyline. pull this yellow nickel into that. Just keep pulling the water. And the story is going to close here through the flow of the hair. And I want to close this part of my tail in the upper part of my canvas. I have to think as much about what I'm not painting in a narrative like this as what I am painting. Get a little green on there. And this closes the upper ranges of my hair, and then I just need to pull this down into this space. Grab quite a strong oxide here. Now, something that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to bend these two spaces with each other because I've got this mountain, but I want her to be bleeding into it. So I'm going to drop a little this gold, but I'm going to start pulling in my gray. Pulling in this Payne's gray. Around our little guy here. He's come to witness us. Just making sure that that has a nice work flow. Pull that down. I think that that will preserve quite nicely, and we're going to let this dry and rest for a second. I'm really happy with how breathtaking this piece is so far. I'm really happy with how the subtleness of her is coming together. I'm looking forward to tightening up areas of her and bringing those into focus and leaving other areas sort of unresolved and unfocused, and I'm hoping that that's going to give us this feeling of like a pleasant unease. I want it to be an unpleasant unease, but I want it to feel just a little bit imperfect and a little bit unresolved, like we must be part of the piece. I think that's a special thing to put into art, where you always allow room for the people who come and engage with your art after it's done, because you have a journey with your art, right, where you're creating it. And then when it's done and it goes out into the world, that journey that you and your art has ended, and the art has another experience with the people who view it. So I always like to leave room for that future. So that's what I'm going to be thinking about right now. This is a good place to stretch and relax your body, and I'll see you back. We're going to continue pushing this forward. So we're going to continue on to the next part of the piece. I'm going to start laying in some of the background distant landscape elements, build it up into the bears, and then into the morning glories with my watercolors. And then I'm going to finish the piece up with my acrylic paint. So the next thing I'm going to do is get my brush wet and go into my Payne's Gray. And I'm going to start working this mountainscape in with the Payne's Gray and probably some Ultramarine Blue, maybe some of the brown. I don't want this to be like completely perfect and uniform, but I do want it to be deep. So I'm going to be blending it around some of this hair space a little bit, just so that these two elements integrate into each other. That's what I'm going to be most concerned about through here, is just the integration of these elements. But also, because I've retained some of this yellow right here, there's a bit of her that's still part of the space. We're playing with how the picture plane, I'm going to get some of this. This is burnt sienna. I'm going to put it into the Payne's Gray. Just brown that up a little bit. I want to play a little bit with the tonalities of things and dance this mountainscape over a little bit, so it feels a little more ravine-ish. All right, a little more ravine-ish. Around these bears, pull up some of this deep blue for down here. And play with how all this lays in relationship to each other. These figures in the front and this landscape in the back. It's fun for me. Hopefully it's fun for you. When you're doing this kind of work, when you're reaching deep into the space where you're starting to talk from the perspective of who you are as an artist, you know, make sure that you're always drawing from someplace really true and authentic in yourself. You know, it's real easy to get caught up in what other artists are doing or not doing, and try to keep in mind there's a difference between picking up skills and techniques and finding your own voice. You know, and it's important to learn how to recognize when your artistic voice is speaking to you and taking you someplace versus trying to mimic somebody else's technique set. And generally how I find that happens for me is I go with my gut. That is how I get to what comes from my voice or my space, is there's ideas or things that catch with me and they really, really speak to me in some way, and I find that is where I'm going to definitely painting around my little flowers here a little bit into this space. I want the space to be a little whimsical and misty. So I'm pulling that up. Loving how the paper is absorbing this amazing pigment in. And I'm just letting this kind of dirty ultramarine have its little moment. Painting around my morning glories a little bit. Around my leaves. So I can put things back if I lose them. You know, remember you can put the things back because you'll be coming back with acrylic paint. So this is just about creating an atmosphere. Something that has an emotional space rather than just a physical space. It's just really all original work. Painting around that up into the bear even a little bit. All right. Encroaching in his domain on the canvas. Just a touch. So yeah, that's what I'm always looking for, is in my gut, in the gut of the matter, is it talking to something that is real for me? And if it is, then I know I'm really in my clear blue sea. And so certain elements will always pull out in my work, like these narrows. Let me get some phthalo blue here. Add this just dabbed in this space a little bit, letting it. It's a subtle touch, but it will make a difference. The ultramarine blue pulling against the phthalo. I'll bring it down around the leaves here. I'm always sort of looking for those dichotomies that come along this little cliff line, again with a darker, fuller pigmented paint. Again, not too concerned because, get some phthalo, come here, pull that in, letting it bleed out. I'm not too concerned because I know that I'll be coming back with my acrylic, and anything that needs a clarification, I can make that. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to start my little tree story. I'm going to just create a distant pine tree line. This is a pine tree line, if you've painted with me a lot, you know I like. You know, it's just tuck that behind her hair. Just want to tell stories of this little deciduous forest. A little branch coming off the cliff here, but I'm still going to drop a friend right here. In my weird little universe, trees are always friends. It's like a rule I have. This little tree that is leaning out, braver than the other little trees around it. Another one right here. Come here on the other side of the house. And I think I'm going to bring a little tree up. This tree may or may not encroach in the house. I decided I'll bring this little bush line along this mountaintop into the red. Just sort of enjoying that whole space. I think I'm going to take this nickel yellow and make sure I've dropped that in my windows. I really, really want my windows to be on. And I may gray out some red here and make a distant red door. I'll pull this past my mountainscape so that it has its own little space as I'm painting this down. I'm going to let things in the house resolve before I come up with the paint into its space. And a lot of what I do, I noticed as an artist, is I put my paint out, and especially when I'm working paper or I'm working water media, I like to allow it to have some space to figure out everything it's going to do. It's a weirdly fun, enjoyable thing for me. I'm going to come off the side here. I don't want a totally even line. I kind of want to pull this into the bear a little bit and down so that we've got this messy, imperfect little other space over here. I'm going to come around my bear. I'm using my 1/2-inch wash right now. I've got just a little pigment loaded on, a mid amount of water. It's not sopping, but it's definitely releasing pigment happily. And I think I'm going to put out some more Ultramarine Blue. You know, I really like these paints, but I think my honest truth is I probably could have done, you know, a lot of this with different types of watercolors. So, you know, don't feel like if you're not exactly tuned into what I'm doing that you can't get what you need out of your piece, because you can. You know, figuring out how you want to work these things out, working these skills, and then where are you going to take the skills I'm sharing with you today? Where are they going to go? How are they going to go through your filtration system? How is it going to process through your authentic journey? Right here, and I don't know if you can see it, I hope you can, some really beautiful bleed magic happened. And I think one of the most important things to do as an artist is recognize when something wonderful is happening on your canvas and let it finish out and see how it pulls itself out, because you may want to be sure that you don't touch it, that you don't interfere with it. I think one of the hardest things for artists is overworking or underworking. It's finding that moment to stop. Where are the breaks? And some of that is just sitting with a piece and being with it and talking to it and getting to know it. It'll tell you. I'm doing the burnt sienna here in the phthalo. I mean, not the phthalo, the Payne's gray. You know, talking to it and understanding it and going, all right, so where are we going together? What are we doing together? You know, how is this going to be true for us? This moment. I know, esoteric right there, but it's really true. You are deep in creation space when you're painting. You're connected to powerful forces inside you. Amazing messages. You're not just painting, you're resolving problems in your life. Your brain is on fire right now. Trusting that is a powerful thing. Trusting that insight that you're having. Trusting yourself, getting that back. If you get anything in painting, trusting yourself, that would be the big thing to get. Pull a little of this ultramarine and the Payne's gray. I'm going to really quick come around here and do a little bit of a wash with this blue. I'm going to come back and still pull it into silhouette. I just want some stuff to be happening here. Just enjoy it. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying this time. This sort of dreamlike, make myself happy creation. A little bit of the burnt here. This is the kind of thing I do when I'm just spending some time with myself. Having some fun in my space. And just enjoying. You know, I could switch to a little brush, but I'm comfortable where I'm at. The Payne's gray and just pulling in this little weird little silhouette house. Odd. So it turns out this is Quinacridone Gold Deep, not Red Oxide. Corrected that in text at the beginning of the video. They're very similar colors, which is to my eye, not in real life, just to my eye. So that's where I had a little moment with that. That happens. You don't worry about these things when they're going on. Now I'm going to pull out a detail brush here. My Payne's gray. I'm going to drop a suspension bridge just right across this chasm. And that was a really important part of the story to me, this bridge between this chasm. Doors and windows that are lit up and bridges across ravines imply paths through. I'm gonna not have perfect ropes though. I want there to be a feeling of ricketiness, but I'm gonna blow a little. Maybe not like that. I'm not gonna blow it like that. I'm gonna come back and kind of work it out a little. Not too thought in. Creating a little shadow around the house. And I think I want to take my stovepipe, just define it a little bit in this space. And I'll come back. I can even do that right now. I've got my soft-bodied white still out. And I'll just put some smoke coming up. I think that's lovely. Okay, so I'm gonna get a little sippy sippy. I'm gonna drop some grasses with my fine little brush. Just little random blades of some brave souls that are existing there. And I feel like that gives me a little bit more lively cliffside there. So I'm going to move down into my bears. Got my little burnt sienna. I'm going to take my phthalo over to it. And I'm still on my 1/2 inch wash. I'm going to just watercolor them in a little bit because I think when I get my paint out, I'm going to want to really pull my details in with my acrylic. So this part of them is just about making sure they're unified to the piece. This sort of whimsical watercolor. But still their own element. Just having some fun with that. Little Payne's gray. Just a little bit of this burnt in Payne's gray. A little bit in the ear here. Off the ruff. Just defining that. I think I want to darkness that I'm going to use to define my eyes. And then a little bit the darkness that we think about being their nose right there. Maybe some shading under his face and along this back belly here. So we're just talking about who he is, but very lightly, very expressively. I'm gonna take my I think this is my yellow ochre. I'm gonna put in this bear right here with this at first. Just washing him in. I can still see my pencil lines. So I still have a guide map back to what my original thought was. And this isn't that far off from my original sketch. Just washing this in. And I'm letting these spaces, like I'm pulling my paint down into spaces I've already defined and allowing them to glaze and layer. And up into spaces I'm soon to define so that they are integrated into each other. Come into my burnt sienna. I'm going to add a little bit of the phthalo blue to deepen it. And then I'm going to come here. Just make sure that I'm get some Payne's gray. Come in and define inside his little ears. Tip of the nose. Some eyes right here. Down into him. I got a little strong there, so I just added some water and I'm moving it out. Just wanting it to not be too much. So pulling in my burnt sienna, I'm going to come work my big bear now. Maybe get some yellow ochre and just kind of loosely structure this in. And again, I'm doing this glaze light enough where I can really see my initial thoughts in pencil, but that I'm tinting and toning the paper and what's going on there. You know, just pulling this color through the big bear. Payne's gray into the burnt sienna. Going around my leaves. I think right here, I'm going to intentionally create some slippage, which is what I like to call where things in the painting are unraveling. They're not retaining as much structure. And I'm gonna do maybe a little of my quinacridone and my ultramarine and make that purple I like so much. I'm gonna work that into this space just a little and dip it. Just a small amount. And through the bear a little bit. I just picked up pigment and put it back on. It's the table 3-second rule. I'm just trying to tell this story super loosely with a little less, conformity than I might normally. That's important. And come back and define up what I'm looking at. Just working this Payne's gray. I'm going to make sure my eyes are darkened in the space where I have that, and under my paw. Inside my ear. Maybe a little bit down the head here, along the nose line. All of which is going to be brought more to heel once I bring the acrylics into it. Now I think I'm going to take this yellow ochre and I'm going to find the center of my morning glories, all of them, and paint that very lightly there. And I'm going to get this wonderful purple color and I'm going to make sure that I've got a nice little shape around the center that I can define a little later. Just mixing up another nice purple and then letting it maybe find its slip. I think that's an important thing. Soften the edge. Come around this one. Come in with the blue a little bit harder. And we're going to have this slip as well. Just trying to find some balance to what's happening here on this piece and give it that dreamlike quality that I'm really fond of. Come over here. Just again, we're going to be talking about that a little bit in a minute. And slip it. Coming along the edge with the red. Coming along the edge with the red. And following along my boundaries. And now I pretty much have a fairly whimsical piece. I'm going to take my Viridian Green and my Hansa Yellow and I'm going to make a very bright green. In just a couple places I'm going to make sure that I have some watercolor on these leaves that I have. Just a little bit, even though I'm going to be coming back. Get some of this dark here and make sure there's some of that happening with the leaves. You know, Maybe allow some of that to splatter. So leave right here. And again, we're going to be coming back super defined. In a little bit, I just want some of these. Not all of them. Just some. Okay, I feel like, other than right there in that little spot, I gotta, there we go. Sometimes that happens. Just make sure you give it a random push through. All right, so this is the watercolor. We're gonna switch it over to acrylic. All right, so now we're switching over to our acrylic. I'm going to be using predominantly golden fluid acrylics because I really like the pigment load and the fact that the body is soft, and that means that the brush strokes are going to be self-leveling, and they're going to really go very well with this watercolor feeling because they'll pull into the paper. Also, word on brushes, I am using a firm filament brush. I am going to be using all brights. For my brand, which is Simply Simmons, it's a 10, a 6, a 4, and a 2. And also some detail rounds. Like those are the really fine micro detail brushes. And those I don't mind if the filaments are softer, but for my overall brushes, I'm going to be working brights. Maybe starting out with a number 2. In my palette here, I have Doxanine Purple, Quinacridone Red, Quinacridone Violet, Yellow Ochre, Phthalo Blue, Nickel Azo Gold, Burnt Sienna, Cad Yellow Medium, Phthalo Green, and a soft body titanium white. Oh wait, this is Indian Yellow. That's so silly. I'm going to pull a little of that, just a small amount, over into my white. Now I'm going to start working the center of my morning glories. Just a little bit. I don't want to remove everything I've done. I just want to create some elements of some greater resolution in them. Again, I have reference photos, and I highly recommend that whatever you're working, especially if you're trying to pull a very imaginative piece together, that you actually try to find as many references for the elements that you're intending to talk about as you can. And I'm just trying to pull this out, and then I'm going to come into my quinacridone, a little white to it. I'm going to just quietly along the edge here define these petals just a little bit, softly pulling it in and not taking out huge chunks of the work I've already done. This is just about the way I can resolve this piece with these two media. And it's kind of a fun thing to do. I can really figure out the petal shapes now. I'm going to get into the Quinacridone Red. Now, what will happen when I'm working paper with my acrylics is the paper is going to pull it in, maybe stronger than you might be used to if you haven't used both mediums together. That's okay. You can see how my morning glory is starting to define itself and find her voice, and pull a little of my dog's name purple into it. Just work that out. Just working that out. Pull some white. Pulling some white. My phthalo with my burnt makes a nice gray. Come here and shade out the interior. The flower. Make sure I've got my rag. I'll just keep working those values until I find a space that makes me happy. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is just find a space that makes me happy in that flower. Just find the shading. Come along here, do a similar deal. Just enjoying maybe a little blue and dog's name purple. Just enjoy how these two things work together. Don't try to make them be each other. What makes this work very, very well is just allowing each media to be itself. Pulling a little bit of yellow in the center. Start putting in the body of the closed Morning Glories. I like to have the base of it be lighter than the tip. A little purple and a little of the Quinacridone Red is a very exciting color. Put that on the tip. Wipe off my brush, get into my weight. Just enjoy the play of those two against each other. I'm just making sure that I arc, bend, a little shadow there. Just very light, a little bit undefined, a little bit defined. It's quite lovely. I'm going to get a detail brush. Very small, graceful detail brush. And I'm going to take a little of my Phthalo over to my Cad Yellow. And I'm going to wind some vines. And leaves. Maybe a little burnt into my green to deepen it. Just having a little fun. Winding little vines. Curling them up. Taking them through the bottom of this piece. Just having a good time with that. That's something I just really enjoy doing, and I'm going to sketch in that design first, and then I'm going to come back with paint and resolve it a little bit. I'm going to mix up my greens. Super fun for me. And it actually really does add something to the piece. So I like to include it. Gives it a very storybook, kind of nouveau feel. And I'm going to leave some of these loose and some very tight, because the idea is that this is a play of, you know, very, very considered space versus very, very loose space. I'm going to grab some deep purple. I'm going to draw the designs in the dark purple inside these morning glories that are closed. I'll keep it very happy. Get some, ooh, watch for that. That'll happen. Get some brown into my leaves. This will make them quite dark. Paint them in. The watercolor ones I may just leave very watercolory and somewhat defined. And some of these I might define more. And in a painting, it's what you define and what you don't define that makes it. The things that you give a lot of information about and the things that maybe you're not as clear on, that you ask the viewer to finish out for you. And that is sort of fun. So I've got some defined little leaves here. Some white and yellow. Create a little highlight there. Maybe a little highlight here. Just sort of give some shape and dimension to these leaves. Maybe a little bit more than what they have. Just something a little bit fun. I don't know, I like that. So that's really finding its little space. And I think I'm ready to move on to some bears now. Alright, so I'm ready to take it on to these bears now. Put into some bear territory. I'm going to lighten up some yellow ochre here. I might even get some of this Indian yellow. I'm going to come along the top and start sort of locking him in. His little furriness. Just starting to tell that story of what's going on with this bear. So I'm enjoying putting in some short little brush strokes. And then just right around this ear. Just having fun. Get some burnt sienna. What fun it is to paint in a bear. Burnt sienna and a little phthalo. Some nice furry strokes here. Very dry and scratchy. Very dry and scratchy. Just I'm just being very, very like loose with this and very abstract with it. I want it to feel almost like drawn in, you know, as we're going. I'm gonna mix the burnt sienna with the Indian yellow. Blend this fur area here with this great color. Scribble him in. I like scribbling in this dark color right up the center of the head. Some brown right there. Some of our deep color really in there in the center. Take that Indian yellow to the top of the paw. I'm going to take this and a little white and just make sure that the back sort of scribbled in, sort of thought in. Bring this, the dark color back in here. A lot of times if you're really loose in one section of a painting, then you'll want to tighten, you know, be loose everywhere. Sometimes you've got to, on this you want to do a dynamic between what is well resolved and what is kind of open and artful to get that sort of like, ooh, feeling. I feel. That's my thinking. Just making darker colors and making sure that I can talk about the value of what's happening here fairly well. And pull out some. That's gray. I think I want black if I have it. Got some black here. To a little clog, so hopefully that will squeeze out. Okay. Too much. That happens to you. That's because you're not taking care of your paint. And that's how that happens. Just want to make sure that I Sketching in a little bear here. Pull out some of these claws. I did these much longer than bear claws actually are. But I did that intentionally. Trying to add a subtle element to the story here. Where we are speaking of this bear in this way. Super fun, like that. Add a little, kind of right here, there. Just a little highlight of gray, very, very high highlighted gray across the top of the nose. And then another little white, sort of. Just to define this little guy here. Just to talk about him a little bit more. Let's go put in the rest of those claws. I like how that is feeling very much. And a lot of this is always about how is it feeling? What does this piece feel like to you? Adding this white highlight to imply a sheen there. And I feel like the foot needs some more kind of definition right here. Sort of painterly fashion. Very, very much like this scruffy, fluffy little bear. I think what I'd like to do is work some walnut ink. This is real Daniel Smith walnut ink. And I think I'm going to just maybe give that a bit of a whirl on my other bears. See how that looks on them. Just put some aside here. Just want to have this sort of light very loosely sketched kind of feeling for him. Just using a detail brush here. Just saying this one back here is maybe just a little less, you know, a little less happening, a little lighter, a little looser, but still pulled up from this background. I don't know if you guys can see that. I think you just do this with a brown wash too. I just really wanted to try this stuff out. It's honestly the truth is I can use things here and play in a way I might not normally be able to. So walnut ink, you can just keep layering and layering and deepening the color and just creating space for him. And I think put the other little bear in the same way. And then we'll resolve Miss Goldilocks. Maybe by the end of this we'll understand what her feelings are about her experience in the woods with the bears. You know, as we journey through life trying to find our place in the world, how do we impact others? You know, sometimes we think of our impact as being very, very, very benign, but in truth, it may not be. I'm dancing the tip of my brush across this little bear, creating this nice little layer. Just very much enjoying this experience here. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, it's the most important thing in whatever you've got going on in your art, is that you've got to be sort of enjoying what you have happening. Just dancing along that little bear, enjoying visiting that bear. I don't want to stay too long. This bear is more of a dream. And see, that's the thing. It's okay to pull things into different spaces, and it's okay to have areas that you really focus on and you drill down on, and then other areas where you're just like, you know, not as much. Though I do think I feel like I want to take a little white, put some light in their eyes, just a little bit, just to say hey. On the top of their noses, their what noses, you know, they're lit up, they're in the woods. And I think I'm ready to start and resolve Goldilocks, and then we should be done with Goldilocks and the three bears. So I'm so ready to do my Goldilocks. So I'm going to just enjoy all my little tools that I have here to bring her in. This, got my black and a little bit of blue. I'm going to start just creating little areas of maybe some more definition. You know, maybe we define things just a little more completely. We'd had them. Coming along the teeth. I'm just thinking about this mouth. Just a little bit. It's fun for me to pull these sort of little spaces in. You know. I'll start really thinking about this mouth and the tension that's there, what she's thinking. So I think it's really important when you're looking at reference photos, the things that you're really looking for on the lip once you have the basic sort of lip shape down, because we tend to want to paint an emotional lip, a symbol of a lip. So once you have your basic lip shape down, and then everybody has kind of a different lip shape, is then you're really thinking about the lights and the darks. What's in shadow and what is not in shadow. You know. And how that might play on your canvas. How that might play out on your canvas. So I'm working my Quin Violet and my Quin Red. You know, enjoying the play of these things. Might even come along the top here with this incredibly intense orange. Start just pulling the story together. We'll see how it goes. Pulling down. You know, I want to pull some of this light color in. Start just pulling this a little bit here and there along the lip. Concentration of it is really right there. These are just these little lines. And curve them and bow them so that they have a defined lip shape. I missed my paint here. A hot studio. Just have the shadow lines coming up and meeting the highlight lines. And we're just going to enjoy bowing and shaping the lip. Adding them here. And they come here just a little bit lighter. Foreshorten them a little bit. I'm back with my violet. Taking out my orange, but it'll glow underneath there. It'll be there. Just clean that up a little bit. Come back with my pink. Just got to keep working. Just keeping it going. This part is the fun part. Maybe get a little bit of my white, ochre. Just pulling in a little bit of highlight there. Almost like a gold highlight on the lip right there. Right there. Alright. I'm going to grab my Indian yellow. And I'm going to start putting in a very light brow line. We'll have to get that. Just putting it there. Maybe another one right here. Just very lightly. Just lightly. Just barely. And I'm going to start enjoying working the eye. So I'm going to take a little of my phthalo out. Maybe a little of my Indian yellow. I'm going to very carefully start working my eye. Just loving working it. Get a little more of the Indian yellow here. A white. Start. Maybe keep it all dark, I think, actually, to start with. And we'll lighten it. We'll do that base in the green. Base will be in the green. Right there. Keep it in the green, keep it dark. Start with, it'll be easier, and then we'll find it as we lighten it up. We'll define it as we lighten it up. And I'm going to get a little of my burnt sienna and my blue. I'm going to take that color and come along my eye line. Then very carefully down below the inside of the eye, which I should be able to see some of. Just blend that out a little bit. Same here, up at the top, blending it out just a little bit. some of your yellow ochre and your Quinacridone Red. I get some white into that mix. Just very lightly along the top of that eye. Just work that a little bit. Just work this lid a little bit too while you've got that color. And we'll come back with the dark color. Just work it a little bit. Add everything just a little bit the lid. Come back with your dark color on this eye. And I'm going to pull this down just a shade, just a touch. You can get your burnt sienna, a little of your blue into it. Go ahead and come along that crease line. Start to define that in a little bit. Just define that in, shade it out. Dark color. Just about halfway on the eye, we're going to shade that. Come the other side. Have a lot of fun doing that the other side as well. I've got my Payne's gray over here, and I'm going to add just a little white to it. A lot of liquid. Make sure that eye under this is in shadow. I'm going to lighten this a bit in a second, but I'm going to want half of that eye to be just a little bit shaded. It's a weird thing we're doing, I know, but it'll help. Just taking the brown in there and shading it a little bit. Now you can put your dark line back, a little blue, a little black, go back with it. Go back with it. And then get that green going again. Which is the Phthalo blue and the Indian yellow. And pull that back into it. We're just really going to focus on the eyes here. Just really, really put our energy and our concern into these eyes. A little purple right along here. A little purple. Just a little purple right along there. And get a little white highlight. Just keep Working that inside there. Don't lose that too much if you need it. Knock it back with some flesh tone. Get your eyeliner again. A little bit of my gray, a lot of my red, a little bit of white. And just start putting the eye back in. Alright, I've got to make sure I've got a little bit of shadow here in the corner. See that I've shaded that on the inside of my eye while it's still wet. I'm going to take a little thin line, create the tear duct. I'm going to drop a tear duct right here as well. Come back with a little of this grayed pink. Grayer than this, we want it a little darker. Start working that in there. Sure you've got a nice little shadow going. A little of this red. Right there on the inside. I'm going to pull a lot more yellow to this green and some white. Start defining the light area in the eye, where the light is hitting this eye. Leaving space for my pupils gazing. Make sure I've got the inside of this eye as well. I'm leaving the outer dark ring. Put my black pupil in. Along the outside edge now, very carefully define the size of my eye. Same thing here. And I'm going to just drop these eyelashes on super carefully, but not very many. I find less is more. This is a lot more, in my opinion. Real light touch of the brush. Just trying to focus on making sure they're not all just in one direction. You know, try to break up them and think about the times that I've used mascara and what's happened to me when I have. Pull out some just yellow here, some white. I'm going to add just a little bit of this into the eye. It's also right here into her eye. I'm going to take a really, really, really wet brush with this black and this blue, and I'm going to come in and enjoy finding some of this. Just a little bit. Water when I come back. Soften it a little bit. Here you go. There we go. And the last thing I'm going to want to do on that eye, pull out some white. I'm going to put in the reflection. There we go. A little at the inside of the eye. A little here. A little right there. There, she's got some reflections. This is a good time to check my level. Get a little gray. Shadow anywhere that needs a shadow. Alright, I feel like I've said some stuff about these eyes, and I'm pretty happy with this, and now I want to say some stuff about the hair. And I'm trying to decide, do I want to say it with the walnut ink, which I really enjoyed the flow of, and I'm thinking maybe I do. So I'll start with that and see how I feel about it. Creating lines of these little hairs. Just these fun little detail points. Just to create a little extra definition to her. Pull areas of detail that matter, but don't worry about the areas of detail that don't matter. I think that gives a little thought and order to her. I might pull some fun little definition right here with my white while I'm looking at it, just because it pleases me. This is a good time to go through your piece and go, where do I wish to talk anymore about anything, or do I feel really good about what I've had to say? So I think she looks pretty good. I'm going to sign her over here. I'm going to sign her in the walnut very discreetly. Where it doesn't take away from the piece. So, that was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope that this somehow illuminated some of the processes and techniques that happen when you're creating an involved fantasy piece like this. I know this is a piece that a lot of people want to be able to do, and I hope watching me go through it and talking to you about what I'm doing and thinking what I'm doing helped illuminate how you might go through it, because at the end of the day, it's about you going through it and you finding your voice in the piece and your insight into the art, which I totally think that you can do. I think anyone can do that. I honestly do. I think everybody actually has voice. That's when we talk about style. I actually say voice. That's the unique viewpoint that you have in the world. And in my personal opinion, you can't help but have one of those. You couldn't, it's so hard to get rid of that. I've been trying. I tried for years. Does it work? You are you. And you've had a unique set of circumstances, like your thumbprint, and it's going to seep into your art. And as soon as you develop enough skills, it's naturally going to start occurring. So that's just about listening to yourself and starting to place a value in your heart and your head about that little voice, which is probably talking to you all the time, more than you might want to know. And then you can create, you know, a wonderful piece. I hope you like Goldilocks. I hope she evoked an emotional experience in you. That was certainly my intention when I thought of this piece. And I appreciate the amount of time you spent with me. I'm looking forward to seeing you for other future things, and I hope you enjoy every project. I'm so excited to see what everybody does. And see you at the easel really soon.